The midnight cry. In Dr. Okoro's clinic, the sun had long slipped behind the hills, leaving a bruised orange and purple sky above the remote town of Edeke, nestled deep in the hills of Enugu State. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and burning palm fronds, a lingering fragrance that spoke of rain from earlier that day and of the countless fires of kitchens preparing dinner. Dr. Chijioke Okoro had arrived in Edeke just 2 weeks ago, but already whispers about him traveled faster than he could walk through the narrow, uneven streets. People said he was the kind of doctor who treated not just the body but also the soul. Perhaps that was why the town clinic, once abandoned to dust and despair, seemed suddenly alive with a glimmer of hope, except at night. The clinic was small, only 2 rooms with peeling paint, the kind of place where the wind seemed to linger in the corners. Dr. Okoro, tall and careful in his movements, walked the hallways each morning, checking on the few patients brave enough to stay. Most were pregnant women, clutching their bellies with quiet fear. For decades, Edeke's infants never lived past the first night. Doctors and nurses came, tried, and left, often muttering about curses or the spirits of the river. Dr. Okoro was different. He did not scoff at the stories. He listened. On his second night, he found himself in the dim light of the clinic's ward, listening to the soft hum of mosquito nets and the gentle rhythmic breathing of newborns. All seemed calm. But then, a sound ripped through the stillness, a cry, high-pitched and ragged, unlike any baby's cry he had ever heard. It came from room 3, where little Ngozi, just a day old, lay wrapped in a thin pink cloth. Her mother, Amaka, sat beside her, eyes wide, whispering prayers under her breath. Dr. Okoro froze. The cry wasn't coming from the baby. It seemed outside of time, echoing from the walls, from the river beyond the clinic, from somewhere beyond human understanding. He stepped closer. "Amaka," he said gently, "what's happening?" Amaka's lips trembled. "It's the river spirits, sir. They come for every child, every single one. My sister, she lost her baby last week, and the one before that, they never leave the night." Doctor Okoro's rational mind struggled against the dread curling in his stomach. "Are you saying these cries are spirits?" Amaka nodded. "The river, it doesn't forgive. Only a prayer from the heart, pure and unbroken, might hold them for a time." That night, Dr. Okoro stayed by the crib, listening as the cries returned soft at first, then rising into an unbearable wail. The clinic's walls seemed to pulse in rhythm with the sound, and he could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon him. Then he noticed her, an old woman, Mama Ifeoma, standing just outside the window. Her white hair shone under the moonlight. She whispered in the wind words. Doctor Okoro could barely understand. "Ngozi is chosen. You must see Chijioke, or all is lost." Chills ran down his spine. "Chosen for what?" he muttered under his breath. Mama Ifeoma vanished before he could answer. The cries ceased abruptly, as if she had silenced them. By morning, the baby slept peacefully. Dr. Okoro looked down, a hint of relief warming his chest, but the relief was hollow. He had glimpsed something that night, something that science could not explain. Desperate for answers, Dr. Okoro followed Mama Ifeoma to the river the next morning. The water ran dark and slow, reflecting the heavy clouds above. The old woman knelt at the edge, hands submerged, whispering in Igbo. "You want to save them," she said, eyes piercing. "But do you understand? The river claims life as balance. For every child, a debt is owed. Only those who respect the spirits, only those who plead with honesty, are spared." Dr. Okoro frowned. "You mean if I pray, the children will survive?" Mama Ifeoma's laugh was hollow. "Prayers alone will not save them. You must be willing to offer something of your own heart." He swallowed. "Of my own heart?" "Yes," she said, water dripping from her fingers. "The river answers, but it asks, and sometimes it asks too much." That night, the cries returned louder than ever. Dr. Okoro, trembling, knelt beside the newborns and whispered prayers he had never said before, opening himself to forces he had long dismissed as superstition. The room grew icy cold. The wind howled like a living thing, and shadows gathered around the cribs. A voice whispered in his ear, soft, feminine, urgent. "Are you ready to pay the price, Chijioke?" Days passed. Miraculously, babies began to survive. Mothers cried with joy. Villagers praised Dr. Okoro. Yet, each night, he felt the weight of something watching, waiting. Then came the warning. A child, tiny Ifunanya, whose cries pierced even the bravest heart, refused to stop. Dr. Okoro stayed with her, praying, but the cries grew unbearable. Finally, Mama Ifeoma arrived, stern and silent. She took his hand and led him to the river. You must choose, she said. One life to save all the rest. One heart to be offered, yours or another's. Dr. Okoro recoiled. Mine? I can't. I'm a doctor. My duty is to save life. Mama Ifeoma's eyes glowed. The spirits do not negotiate. They take what they must. You can plead, bargain, or obey. One night, one heart, and the rest live, fail, and none survive. He staggered back to the clinic. In the crib, Ifunanya stared at him with knowing eyes, her tiny fingers reaching for his chest. Something in him broke. Dr. Okoro barely slept that night. He sat by the crib of little Ifunanya, her tiny chest rising and falling with each desperate gasp. The cries were no longer just sounds. They were a manifestation of the river itself, a relentless demand for balance. He rubbed his temples, trying to think scientifically, but the truth was undeniable. Something beyond medicine had invaded his clinic. His phone vibrated. A message from Amaka. The river takes tonight. We will lose her if you do nothing. He whispered under his breath, pacing the dimly lit ward. One life. Mine to give, or hers, or what? A sudden clatter made him stop. From the shadows emerged Mama Ifeoma, holding a small calabash filled with river water. Her eyes were piercing, luminous under the flickering fluorescent lights. You cannot hide from it, she said softly. The river chooses who it answers. Tonight, it has chosen you. I can't die, he stammered, panic gripping him. I have responsibilities. I can't just... The river does not negotiate, she interrupted. It only collects. Doctor. Okoro's mind raced. If I offer myself, maybe the other babies survive. He knelt, placing his hand over Ifunanya's tiny one. Her fingers closed around his like a fragile seal. He felt a warmth, almost like life itself was flowing into him. And then the clinic walls shivered, a low hum vibrating through the floors. Mama Ifeoma led him outside, the calabash cradled in both hands. The air was thick, and the moon hung like a cold eye over the river. The water shimmered unnaturally, almost silver, though the night was dark. You must step into the river, she instructed, and offer your heart in truth. Only then. Her voice trailed off, eyes fixed on the rippling surface. Dr. Okoro's rational mind screamed, I am a doctor, not a priest, not a fool. This is impossible. Yet, every child back at the clinic slept peacefully for the first time in decades. He had already seen what refusal meant. He stepped forward, calves wet from the riverbank mud. The water lapped at his knees, then his waist. The surface shimmered, and he thought he saw faces tiny, crying, floating, reaching. Babies who had died in a decade, faces twisted in fear and accusation. Chijioke, a voice hissed from the river. Do you understand what you are giving? Yes, he whispered, trembling. Yes, I offer myself to save them. The river surged, and the calabash slipped from Mama Ifeoma's hands into the water. The current pulled it, sending ripples that glimmered like stars. Suddenly, a figure rose from the water, a woman, tall, shrouded in mist, eyes glowing faintly green. She was beautiful, terrifying, and undeniably otherworldly. You offer your heart, she said, but hearts can be deceptive. The river asked for truth. Doctor, Okoro felt something deep in his chest tighten, a physical twisting pressure. I am willing, he said, voice shaking. The river spirit's hand emerged from the mist, hovering just above his chest. Are you willing to live your life, your family, your ambitions, your soul, everything? Yes, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. For the children, for Ideke. The spirit tilted her head, studying him. Then, give it freely. He did. He felt his heartbeat slow. Then the world tilted. Colors bled together. His body felt simultaneously heavy and weightless. The river embraced him like a lover, cold but strangely comforting. He gasped, realizing he could feel the lives of every baby in the clinic, their tiny lungs filling, their cries silenced, their mother's relief, a tangible, almost glowing warmth in the night. Then the river withdrew, and Dr. Okoro fell to the bank, coughing, soaked, trembling, but alive. The next morning, Edeke woke to unimaginable peace. Babies slept soundly, mothers whispered prayers of thanks. Villagers crowded around the clinic, praising Dr. Okoro, yet something was wrong. He noticed first in the mirror. His eyes had changed. Where once they were warm brown, now they shimmered faintly green, like the river itself. When he looked at the babies, He could feel their lives in his chest, a gentle pulse, like a heartbeat he carried with him. Mama Ifeoma appeared at dawn, her expression unreadable. "The river accepted your offering," she said softly. "But remember, Chijoke, the river does not forget. You live, yes, but you are not entirely yours anymore. You are bound to it." Dr. Okoro's stomach dropped. Bound? What does that mean? She smiled faintly, almost sadly. "Every cry you hear now, every child in Edike, every life you touch, you will feel it, in body and soul. And when the river calls, you will answer, always." He realized with dawning horror that his connection to life and death had shifted, that his empathy was no longer limited to human understanding. Ifunanya giggled from her crib. He felt it as a jolt of electricity through his chest. The river had made him its guardian, but also its prisoner. Years later, Dr. Okoro became legendary in Edeke. Children survived, the village flourished, but he never left the town. The river had taught him its lesson. True sacrifice is never simple, and even acts of heroism carry a price beyond understanding. He often walked to the river at night, listening. The water whispered secrets of past lives, warning of future ones. Sometimes, he saw the faint glow of the spirits of children he had saved, and even those who had not survived, their faces flickering in the mist, like silent accusatory stars. The villagers celebrated him, never knowing the full cost. He smiled, but the warmth never reached his eyes. He had learned the strangest and deepest truths. Saving life sometimes means giving your very self to the forces beyond life. And when the midnight cries rose again, somewhere beyond the river, in a newborn's lungs or a dreaming mother's heart, Dr. Okoro listened, not in fear, but in understanding. He had survived, but he was never entirely alive. The river, as always, waited. One quiet night, decades later, a young doctor arrived in Edik. Villagers greeted her warmly. She introduced herself. "Dr. Amara," smiling kindly. Dr. Okoro watched her approach from the riverbank, eyes glinting green in the moonlight, and then he whispered to the river, "It begins again." The water rippled, and a faint, high-pitched cry echoed, faintly familiar, but terrifying in its clarity. The water rippled, and a faint, high-pitched cry echoed, faintly familiar, but terrifying in its clarity. The cycle of life, sacrifice, and the river's demand continued, and perhaps it would never end. And so, the story comes to a close. But remember, every tribe has its secrets, every village its whispers, and every night its own echoes. If you listen carefully, the world is full of tales waiting to be told. Until next time, keep your heart open, your mind curious, and your ears ready for the next folktale from many tribes.